Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to week 2 of Beneath the Waves with myself, Matt Silver. I am a head teacher of a special needs school in Harrow, and with Dave Hughes, who is our senior practitioner from Complete. Good evening, Dave.
Hi, Matt. Hi, everyone. How are you, Matt?
I am very well, thank you very much, Dave. I'm very much looking forward to tonight's show. We're going to actually start off just checking in, taking a moment, if we can use the chat system on the side of the webinar, just to, Dave set a task last week around that breathe exercise that Katie has kindly demonstrated to us. Could people just drop in how successful that's been for them this week? So Dave originally set in the challenge of 1 breath for 1 minute on day 1, and then it was all the way up to 7 breaths by today, Dave. Am I right in saying that?
Increasing 1 minute a day. Yeah, just let us know how you got on with that. And if you haven't had time to do it, then that's fine. But just maybe share on the chat how you got on with it and how your week's been. While you're doing that, let me give you a reminder of what we covered last week. And maybe, Matt, you could put the slide up. So we covered really 3 things last week. Last week was week 1. We introduced what we call the 4D leadership model and talked about how we all spend so much of our time doing stuff, doing, task, and not nearly enough time looking at the we, the people around us, relationships, and the I, looking after ourselves, which becomes even more important in stressful times like the ones we're living in at the moment. We introduced the integrated performance model, the iceberg, and talked about how we're all here to make a difference. And we want to deliver great results. Of course, it starts with our behaviors, our actions, our thinking. But what most of us don't spend enough time thinking about is the importance of our feelings, our emotions, and our physiology. And how, if we want to be the best we possibly can, we have to make sure we really understand and manage all of those areas under the iceberg. And we then spent some time, we introduced the breathe skill to you, which is the fundamental skill in managing your physiology, controlling your heart rate variability and generating a coherent signal from the heart to the brain, which is what enables you to think clearly and creatively. So let's have a look at the chats that have been coming through.
Okay. Dave, do you want to sort of review there?
Yeah, I mean, what's...
I think Jan's point around did it when I remembered is a really interesting one. That idea of what prompts are you using to remind yourself throughout the week to breathe, definitely.
Yeah, and the trick with this is try and find a way of building it into your daily routine. Whether it's something you do first thing when you wake up, it's something you do after breakfast, in however you find it. And obviously our days are all very different at the moment, but try and find a way of building it into your routine. As we said last time, as you get more skilled at this, you'll find ways of just doing it all the time when you need it before a tricky situation. But at the beginning, it really helps to have that routine built in so you can do it as much as possible.
Okay, one other piece of feedback from last week was just checking in what the 6 weeks were about. So we've just prepared a brief overview that we wanted to share with you. Last week, obviously, we focused on the areas that Dave has just covered. This week is around the emotions and the science and how to manage your emotions during these really challenging COVID-19 times. And then next week, we're going to have our guest, Dr. Alan Watkins, the CEO of Complete, actually coming in to work around the mastery and shift skills that bring together week 1 and week 2 in how we actually feel around our emotions and how we can manage to shift our emotional state. And then week 4, we're moving more from the I to the we. So we're looking at team cohesion and communication. To week 5, touching in on maintaining and building trust and relationships in a virtual world. And very much tied to that in week 6 is around efficient and effective virtual meetings. So we don't intend on stopping after week 6, but we wanted to trial it and see how it went. And so this is where we're up to at this point. So we're going to see how that goes. And as always, you can check in on the YouTube channel and with the podcast following the show if you can't get to any of those as well. So we're sharing those on LinkedIn and Twitter. So please feel free to follow us on there.
And again, if there's anything specific you would like us to cover, please drop us an email or send us a message with anything you would particularly like to get out of these sessions.
Yeah. So launching into this week's show on emotions, what we're actually asking you to do straight off from the start is actually look back on your week and just think to yourself, okay, is there, can you make a list of emotions around what you have actually felt over the last week? So what are those emotional states that you've been feeling over the last week?
Yeah, just write them down if you've got a piece of paper and a pen, or put them on your phone, or if you're out walking or can't do that, just try and sort of think of them in your head. We'll just give you sort of 20 seconds or so just to think about that and reflect back on the week.
Okay, and as you're completing that in your head or on a piece of paper, we're going to put a poll up just to see exactly how many emotions we felt we've actually experienced over the last week, and can we name them as well? So please complete the poll as you go through, and we'll feedback from that later.
And there's no right answer, just however long your list is.
I wanted to touch on emotions, Dave, in the point of what is a sort of almost chapter and verse within Complete, and around the idea that there are 3 E's that we can do to support our well-being at this time during COVID. There is exercise, which, depending on whether you're following Joe Wicks or not, is happening frequently, but typically around sort of once or twice a week. There's then the eating. So what are our eating habits at the moment? What do we have access to? And then there's emotions. And emotions are continuous and all of the time, much like our breathing work last week. So the importance of emotional intelligence is really going to be brought home by understanding that this evening. So Dave, how's that poll looking to you?
Yeah, I mean, no surprises at all with clients. This is typically what we would get, anywhere typically between sort of 5 to 10 is where most people are, as this poll indicates. So some 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15. A few with more than that, some 1 or 2. I think it's 1 with 15 to 20, 1 with 20 plus. There are actually 34,000 emotions that we can feel. Certainly there's at least 2,000 that we'd all recognize, but 34,000 in total. And many of us, we're asked how we are, and we typically say either okay, or feeling pretty crap, or yeah, I'm good, no, rubbish. Our repertoire of emotions is not very extensive. So let me talk to you about emotions, and we'll give you some skills for how you develop your own awareness and literacy around emotions. So what we're about to show you is what we call the high performance grid. And so your emotions can either be activated, high energy, intense, or they can be relaxed. And they can either be positive emotions or they can be negative emotions. And what would be quite interesting is just have a go at mapping the emotions you wrote down before on this grid. So, how many are there in the top left? I put a few examples here: passionate, enthusiasm, motivated. Or are they top right? Angry, frustrated, anxious. Bottom right, are you feeling apathetic, loss of control given the current situation, inattentive, detached? Or are you feeling bottom left, relaxed and positive, which is more content, calm, peaceful, receptive, interested? And there's a great tendency for us to believe that if we want to deliver high performance, we have to be in the top half of this grid. People use words like making sure you're pumped up before a sporting event or before a big meeting, fired up, motivated, passionate, even angry. I've had bosses say, get angry before you go into a big board meeting or a big something. Whereas actually, being angry is not helpful at all if you're wanting to deal with a situation. When you're angry, you tend to blurt stuff out. And that is because your brain's not working properly. You're not thinking clearly. Your brain is partly shut down because, as we spoke last time, if you're on the right-hand side of this grid, feeling negative emotions, that's associated with catabolic hormones such as cortisol. It's also associated with when your amygdala comes into play and your whole threat system starts to activate. And that's when you get fight, flight, or freeze. And literally part of your brain shuts down. The frontal lobe's partly shut down. And that gives you the DIY lobotomy we were talking about last time. So what's much more important if you want to drive performance and achieve is to be on the left-hand side of the grid, to be in a positive emotional state. This is where it's underpinned by anabolic hormones such as DHEA. And this not only enables you to think much more clearly, much more creatively, it's also much better for you health-wise. A high cortisol, low DHE ratio is associated with a lot of bad health problems, from heart disease to diabetes to obesity and many more. So there's all sorts of reasons why being on the left-hand side in a positive emotional state is what's really good for you, and we should all be trying to spend as much of our time on that side of the grid as we can. And that's why the breathe, if you go on to the next slide, Matt, that's why the breathe skill is so important, because what the breathe skill does is it helps move you from the right-hand side of this grid over towards the positive side of the grid. It helps move your heart rate variability from a chaotic state into a coherent state. And that signal goes from your heart to your brain and is what helps you think clearly, creatively, and so on. So that's a little bit, let's try and bring it to life a little bit. Maybe Matt, talk about how you've brought this to life in Shaftesbury High School and with your students and with all of the staff, because I think you've done an amazing job with that.
Thank you very much, Dave. Very much supported by yourself and your work with the school. So what we did was we actually used Complete's Universe of Emotions app, and based on us being a SEND school, but also looking at the number of emotions that we are able to articulate. And when I've run this with staff, it sort of rings true to the poll numbers this evening. We lifted off really common emotions that the planets on the universe of emotions that we could see. And we dropped it onto a framework that we considered to be the top 30 emotions as a guide for our learners, but also for our staff. Staff typically actually could name between about 5 and 10 emotions. And as a school with very complex learners, we wanted to make sure that when we practice things like positive behavior and restorative practice, our learners could actually articulate the emotions that they were feeling, but also for our staff to be able to articulate that feeling and emotion, but also to place it on where their physiological state is right now. And that key question in education is, are they ready for learning? Are they ready to engage in a difficult conversation, depending on who you're talking about, of course. But our main goal was actually around how do we use that breathe skill to bring people back to what would be key in education, really around focus. How do we have that focus, which is a very central emotion on the quadrant. So despite studying sort of emotional intelligence for 10 years, for me, having this framework has really enabled me to place emotions that I'm feeling in my head and visualize that framework, and then to be able to articulate the emotion that I'm feeling, and even to inform my decision making about, am I in the right place to make this decision right now, or have that difficult conversation, or engage in learning, or do I need to take a step back and step back to breathe again, to reset before we get into those positive cycles over on the left. And as a leader, to be able to do that and to be able to have that emotional intelligence, you're not just being able to articulate, you're also being able to manage. And I think that that role model right now is essential in, are we keeping the calm, or are we setting off those negative emotions over to the right of the quadrant? So bringing this into the school, we've actually seen an 83% reduction of negative behavior incidences. And I mean, there's lots of variables that go into that, but again, being able to explain our emotions has been massive for us in the school, and certainly within the leadership team, when we're looking at transparent, trusting conversations.
That 83% reduction, that's fantastic. How did the staff react when you first started doing this, Matt? Because I remember walking into your office and seeing this on your board, but you know, it's pretty weird. It's quite unusual. Did it take some time for staff to sort of get used to talking about their feelings and sharing them with colleagues and so on?
Yeah, I think with anything that it's beneath the surface, as the webinar is called, Beneath the Waves, anything that touches on things that can't be seen and tangible can be very difficult to process if you don't have a framework like this, and the framework certainly supported that. But I would definitely say there are some people who resisted delving into their emotions, because it can be quite murky water. The associations of emotions and where they come from, it can be tricky to navigate. But very much these days, it's quite a common vocabulary across the school. So what we're looking at doing is actually really just focusing on the remaining people who are rejecting those emotions right now, and trying to shift the culture as a whole into a far more positive state. And that's not to reject the negative emotions. That's not to say that they're bad. We've got to observe that they're there. We've got to be able to quickly manage that change. And a brilliant example for that is probably not my 2-year-old that you can hear in the background, but one of our Year 7 students who has really sort of complex behavioural history. And we've been working really closely with her on her breathe skill and her ability as a very intelligent young lady to articulate her emotions. And she's actually become our mindfulness teacher in Year 7 now. So she supports other students, and we promote leadership across the school. But of course, to be a leader across the school, you need to be able to manage yourself in order to support others. And so we're really seeing that if our students can do that, then our staff can certainly do that. And they can't really argue quite so much with the science that sits behind it. So we're really pleased with how it's going at Shaftesbury. Plenty more to go.
Lovely story. I really like the story about the Year 7 pupil becoming the mindfulness teacher. Nice comment from Debs about color coding and visualizing emotions helping with your students. So that's great.
Yeah.
Let me move on and talk about a couple of skills we want to leave you with today. And then we're going to do this each week, is leave you with 1 or 2 very practical and tangible skills. And these skills are all around emotions. So let me start. When we talk about emotions, there's 3 things really to do. One, it starts with building your awareness, building your list from 1 to 5, 5 to 10, to 20 plus, to 100 plus, and just building your awareness of your different feelings as you go through the day. And as you do that, as I said, building your awareness, increasing your repertoire, which is what we call literacy. Building awareness and repertoire is awareness and literacy. And then developing your control, so your management of emotions and your ability to move from one emotion to another emotion. And that chart you saw on there is actually Matt's self-assessment about 9-10 months ago when we started working together. And he actually started in a much stronger place than a lot of our clients do when we start working with them. So I'm going to talk to you about 2 skills. Maybe, Matt, can we just put the slides back on?
Sure.
So the first one is what we call an e-diary. So just as you did for that simple exercise at the beginning, try and notice more the feelings you're having throughout the day. You know, a lot of us go through the day without ever being conscious of our feelings, other than the very strong ones we occasionally get. But try and be more aware of and notice the feelings you're having, and capture them in what we call an e-diary, an emotion diary. That can either be on your phone, on a piece of paper, on an app, You can use the Universe of Emotions app that Matt mentioned earlier to help you with this. And reflect either at the end of each day or maybe end of a few days, just reflect on your own emotional heat map. How many of your feelings are in the top right versus top left? You know, how many are activated or relaxed and negative or positive, and where do they fit on that emotional grid?
And I think that's a really important task. Dave, obviously you set the breathe skill last week, but if we're setting that for this week, tying into Dr. Alan Watkins coming in next week, to be able to observe where your feelings and emotions are actually sitting is going to be really vital if you're going to be adopting the shift skill next week. So I do encourage you to do that as much as possible.
And the second skill then is what we call the e-bank, which goes alongside the e-diary. So what's also a really nice exercise to do again is sit down and just look back at the last day, few days, week, and look at your energy levels and what is it that has boosted your energy and what is it that has drained your energy, and make a list of the two. Make a list of the boosters, and while you're making the list of the boosters, sort of relive those moments and the positive sort of energy, the uplifting side of those boosters. And then make a list of the drainers. And as you're writing the list of the drainers, try and sort of almost sweep them to the side and forget them. But this is a really useful exercise, A, for boosting your energy in its own way, but also just for understanding this so that you can then look at how can you get more of the boosters in your life, spending more time with boosters and less time having things that drain your energy happening at the time. So if you can have a go at those two skills this week, as Matt said, next week we're going to talk to you about how you actually change your emotional state. You know, change out of a state of anxiety. So I was telling Matt earlier, I made the mistake of reading through the whole of the paper this morning and ended up feeling very anxious and scared. I have a daughter who's a nurse working in Manchester, and another one who's about to start working at a care home, and I suddenly started to feel very scared for them. You know, but the ability then to move into a more positive emotional state is so important. And we'll teach you again some very practical skills to enable you to do that. So that's what we're going to focus on next week. Okay, I think we should probably, we've got 5 minutes to go, and we wanted to leave some time for Q&A this time. Matt, by the way, is very passionate about emotional intelligence in school, as I'm sure you picked up earlier. So any questions you've got about what he's done in Shaftesbury High School in this area, and I'm sure he's very happy to share. So we've got 5 minutes left. So we'll run, if you've got any questions, please do use the chat or use the Q&A icon at the bottom. And then what we're also going to experiment this week is, so we'll run the Q&A for 5 minutes. And then for anyone who wants to stay on for another 5, 10, 15 minutes, we'll sort of just open it up into a bit of a forum. We'll give all of you access to speak. We won't turn your videos on because to protect your privacy. But if you want to have a bit of a chat or ask more questions or just share some views on the topic, we're happy. You know, Matt and I will stay on for however long you want to. And if you don't want to, anyone who wants to leave at the end of the half hour, yeah, of course you must do that. So any questions coming through?
I'll just say, Dave, while we're waiting for that, I think just touching back on the I, we, and it model for leadership, the essential aspect of emotional intelligence in education is not just looking at ourselves as leaders, but actually it's about embedding this across the whole school. And in order to teach anything, you have to understand anything. And everyone that's on here this evening is a teacher and will understand that. But to be able to articulate that and have that key vocabulary across the school is a real essential part of being able to transform that, because we have it up in every single classroom. So to be able to pull on that framework at any time during any discussion and to really be able to objectify and stand back from that is really beneficial. But also the long-term impact of positive state and positive development just shines through into the learning, and then of course the outcomes that come out from more of those it tasks. So just looking at the emotional intelligence isn't just looking at the I and the we, but also very much looking at the improving the it. So we'll hand over for some questions. So Dave.
Yes, I've got a couple have come through, Matt. So Elizabeth asked, how do the numbers on the heat map work? What do they mean? They're literally just number of feelings you've had in that quadrant. So if you felt angry and anxious and annoyed at different times during the week, that would be 3 feelings, 3 times you've had feelings in that quadrant, and so on. So that's all it represents. So it's an attempt to, it's not time, but it's an attempt to give a feel for how many feelings you're feeling on that grid. And then the second question, I think, Matt, is more for you, which is, how did you launch and get buy-in amongst the senior leadership team and other staff regarding emotional intelligence and the benefits?
Wow. So that started a long way back. I'm trying to be prompt in my answer from this, but when we reset the values for the school, when I started back in September 2017, one of them was positivity that came through, and that wasn't myself acting in an authoritarian way of demanding what those values were going to be. That was working with every single stakeholder in the school. So we had a real buy-in to the fact that this was a value, and therefore this is what we live by as a school and what we believe our culture should be. So positivity was already there. So when it came to explaining what positivity was and how we can actually generate that positivity with things like the quadrant, the belief system was already in place around this is where we want to get to benefit our learners in order for them to be ready for learning. So the other two that go with that are well-being and empowerment, and there are 3 values, and they all are very much focused over on that left-hand side of the quadrant. So we've had to do this on repeated occasions. We've done it through coaching, we've done it through voluntary leadership training, we've done it through whole school conferences, both in the school and out in the broader community, to share it with other schools. And it's again about how do we really tap in to generating a positive culture, but being able to articulate against that framework means that we can hold people to account against that framework as well, including ourselves, I should add. That's
Okay, so we've got a couple more come in. So Fiona is asking, putting a number in the quadrant, I get it, but does it help to see if there's a particular emotion that affects you, especially in the negative quadrant, and how you would deal with that? Yeah, the answer is yes, Fiona. And I think, at the beginning, as I said, it's really about getting awareness of all of the different emotions you're feeling and expanding your vocabulary around different emotions. So for example, you might be feeling, when anyone asks me how I am, I tend to say, yeah, I'm good, thanks. But what does good mean? Is it and sort of activated positive? Is it good? Does it mean sort of happy, ecstatic, excited? Or does it mean, yeah, I'm nice, I'm, calm, I'm fine, I'm contented? Same with so you might have a negative emotion. When after I'd finished reading the papers, how did I feel? And I actually identified, I actually felt scared. I was scared. But the more precise you can be, the better. And understanding how that feels in your body and the physiology of that feeling. What color is it and how it moves in your body? And we'll talk a lot more about this week, next week, because it's really about mastery and understanding it. So the more you understand that emotion, the more then you are able to shift out of that emotion into another emotion. So you're absolutely right. And we'll talk, that's exactly what next week is about, is how you do that. And then Rebecca, you said, can you repeat the 3 steps to emotional development? Yeah, one is awareness, just awareness of what you're feeling. A lot of us, our society, the culture we live in, has not a lot of focus on feelings and emotions. So just being aware and conscious of your feelings and the emotions in your body as you go through the day. And the second step is what we call literacy. So and the universe of emotions really helps with this, because it clusters emotions together. So you can find one, and then you get a cluster of all the other sort of that are around it. So it can help expand your repertoire. And then the third one is managing your emotional state. And we talk about, because we have this universe of emotions and it's about planets, being able to move off planet anxiety into planet calm, from planet frustrated into planet optimistic, for example. So how do you do that? And again, that's really the focus of next week.
So, as Dave mentioned, we're going to have a follow-up open forum. You're more than welcome to join us for that. Obviously, it's a trial, so we're going to see how this one goes. But from us, we just wanted to finish by, again, supporting our leaders and our frontline staff in education during a really difficult time, and that wave of change that's hitting us right now. So just to end and to reflect on the importance of this momentary pause to take stock of who you are and what you're doing and the vital importance in the world. We're just going to finish with Aristotle this week, and just saying that educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all.